The elderly couple in an old domestic car bounced down the dusty gravel road, miles from the highway where yuccas and prairie grasses pressed the sides of the road and stretched as far as the eye could see. Their destination, unclear. Dana was in her mid-80s and started feeling the decline of her body and her spirit. Life had been harsh as she labored for nearly 60 years as a seamstress for the rich folks on the other side of town. She had spent her life serving other people and forgetting all the while to take care of herself. Though she was generally a cheerful person, like many of her generation, the bad side of life was bottled up inside her aching heart. Her husband Red, who was a couple years younger than Dana, had just been diagnosed with a rare incurable cancer. Together, they decided to take a long road trip with no particular destination in mind. Their car was starting to show some wear. Rust had worked its way through the quarter panels and was starting to bubble the paint on the trunk lid. It was transportation and it was paid for, and now that was all they needed. Lunch was going to be at a favorite roadside picnic table. The area was surrounded by a thick stand of trees, probably planted during the Great Depression by WPA workers. They perfectly cupped the old redwood picnic table. The most interesting part of the place, though, were the 7-foot-tall cornfields on all sides of this illogically placed roadside rest stop. Nothing to see but strong green corn in every direction, the true heartland. The stop was a good 2 hours from Des Moines, where they visited their daughter once or twice a year. This time, though, was different. Today, they didn't stop for a visit, but they turned south on Old State Highway 3. Since the superhighway had been built 15 miles to the north back in 1953, this road was mostly used by locals now. It was 2 lanes wide and more comfortable ride for the old couple. Along the way, they reminisced about their long lives, their accomplishments, their disappointments, and their family. Before they had kids, Dana and Red loved traveling to exotic places all over the United States. Coney Island was one of the first such places. The crowds, the crazy rides, the romance of it all was a lasting memory for both. They always dreamed of going back there someday, but busy lives and finances had long ago dashed those thoughts. A year or two later, they made their way to upstate New York to visit Niagara Falls. They got soaked on the Maid of the Mist boat tour, and Red almost fell over the guardrail trying to get the perfect picture. But it's moments like these that built a bond between them that would last for over 50 years. With all the travel they did, road trips to visit their kids and grandkids were the most memorable. Like the time they visited their son and his family in Tucson. They had piled into a couple of cars and drove out to the Sonoran Desert for a picnic. After several hours in the blazing sun, everyone was so sunburned they cried and laughed at each other all the way home. As they drove west across the plains of Kansas, they sat mostly in silence, each reflecting on their own sense of value in the years they had been together. Although they'd lived in a nice, modest house, Red regretted that he was never able to provide the luxuries that they had both dreamed of when they were young. Dana always worried that she had not been the best wife and mother. Yes, they had a close family, but could they have made their children's lives better? Having family get-togethers at their cabin in Minnesota was one of those things that brought peace to their lives. Everyone would come from wherever they lived at the time and meet for a week or two in the woods. Fishing, swimming, and just catching up with one another left deep family ties for all of them, especially the grandkids. One year, they changed their routine and rented a house in New England. Red decided to take a shotgun off the wall and go hunt down something for dinner. He came back with a single rabbit. The problem was there was so much buckshot in that little fella's body it was deemed inedible. Red was embarrassed, and the family never let him forget about it. After 3 days of long roads, cheap motels, and diner food, Dana and Red were starting to show fatigue. As they forged on, Dana was regularly napping, and Red was just trying to stay awake at the wheel. Wherever they were headed was starting to become an issue. Anxiety was creeping in. Doubts about what they were doing was dominating their thoughts. They had stopped talking to each other and just stared off into the horizon as they aimlessly drove into the distance. On the fourth day, about 4:30 in the afternoon, Ray slowed the car to a crawl. He'd spotted an old decrepit gate breaking the endless barbed wire fence line. Without thinking too much about it, he cranked the wheel to the right and drove through. The fatigued automobile barely moved down the narrow, dusty road, though it really wasn't much of a road, maybe a car and a half wide, full of desert weeds, rocks, and unseen wildlife. A majestic line of gray mountains stood off in the distance. Ray kept moving forward as best he could, but never got over 15 miles an hour anywhere along the stretch. He had no idea where he was going, but it just seemed right. After a half hour or so of difficult driving, Ray noticed a slight change in the landscape. It looked like he was approaching a ridge of some sort. Dana was sleeping and had no idea where they were. After a time, he came to a standstill at the top of a long hill. The terrain below changed dramatically. The confusing and remarkable thing about this location was the valley below was literally filled with abandoned vehicles. What the hell's going on, he thought. He half-heartedly tried to wake Dana, but was too confounded by what was outside to notice she was slumped over against the passenger window. Here, out in the middle of nowhere, about 200 yards ahead, was a decaying building with a barely legible sign that read Odds Motel. As he inched forward, the glare of the sun became so intense that he could no longer see. He suddenly felt nothing as his hands dropped from the wheel. He glanced over at Dana and thought to himself, "We've arrived, sweetheart."